Really glad you're here today. My name is Wade Hunter, and I want to walk you through something that has been happening in rural Ohio that multiple witnesses are only now beginning to piece together. None of them knew the others existed, and that is exactly what makes what they described so difficult to dismiss. Denny Carver is 58 years old, retired utility lineman, 30 years running wooded corridors across rural Ohio. Fence lines, drainage cuts, the marginal land between farms that most people drive past without looking at twice. He is not a Bigfoot person. I want to be precise about that because it carries weight here in a way it does not always carry. Denny Carver spent 3 decades in outdoor terrain as a profession, not a passion, which means his baseline for normal in those environments is built from 30 years of early mornings in places that most people never stand in. He knows what belongs in that terrain and what does not. He had one morning that he could not file anywhere. He wrote it down for himself, not for anyone else. And what he wrote is where this episode begins. He wrote it down because he needed it to exist somewhere outside his own head. And that is exactly what an unexplainable morning does to a person. It was late August, pre-dawn. He was running a fence line on his brother's property in Licking County, a stretch of working farmland and second-growth woodland that he had walked more times than he could count. The kind of route where your body does the work and your mind goes somewhere else. Fog in the low fields, dark enough that the tree line was still a solid wall, not individual trees yet. He had started early to beat the heat, and he was maybe 20 minutes into the fence line when he stopped. He did not hear anything. He did not see anything. He stopped because something in the quality of the morning had changed, and his body registered it before his mind caught up to why. He has worked enough pre-dawn hours in enough terrain that he knows the difference between quiet and the particular quality of quiet that means something in the immediate area has gone completely still. Those are not the same thing. Normal pre-dawn quiet has texture to it. Insects, small movement in the brush, the ambient sound of a place going about its business. What he felt that morning was the other kind. The kind that means everything nearby has made a decision to stop. He has felt that a handful of times in 30 years, and he knows what it usually means. That morning it meant something different. He turned toward the field edge. There was a shape at the tree line, upright, motionless. He ran what he was seeing against every category he had. Deer at distance in low light, a bear on its hind legs, a person standing at the field edge at 4:30 in the morning. The upright posture, the stillness of someone just standing there. He settled on person, and he did what any working man does when he finds a stranger on his brother's property at 4:30 in the morning. He walked toward it. He had installed a fence post marker at that field edge himself years earlier, a standard utility marker, and he knew its height the way you know the dimensions of something you put in the ground with your own hands. He was maybe 40 feet in when his legs made a decision his mind had not caught up to yet and stopped him. The proportions were resolving as he closed the distance, and they were not resolving into a person. The width of it was wrong. The way the mass of it sat over its feet was wrong. His 30 years of pre-dawn terrain gave him exactly one clear signal, and the signal was that nothing he had ever stood 40 feet from had looked like this. The shoulders were wrong. The head sat differently on the frame than a human head does. And the eyes, he had taken them for a trick of ambient light at distance, cleared the top of that marker by a margin that was not close, higher register than a deer caught in low light. Further apart, placed at a height that put them well above anything Denny had a biological reference for. He stood there at 30 feet while his body processed what his eyes were sending it, and found no category that fit. Then it turned sideways, not fleeing, just repositioning, and walked into the woodlot, deliberate, unhurried, the sound of it moving through the underbrush for a moment, and then nothing. Denny walked to the tree line, not into the woods, just to the exact spot where it had been standing. The soil was soft from recent rain. The impressions were immediate and unambiguous. He pressed his size 11 boot next to the largest one and looked at the difference in scale, photographed them, put his phone in his pocket, and finished the fence line. Because the fence line still needed finishing, he told nobody for 6 weeks. Then he found out that 3 weeks before his morning on that fence line, something had been standing in the same county watching someone else, from the same height, with the same eyes. I've secretly been investigating the Bigfoot files in my spare time, and what I've found can't be shared on YouTube since I'll be censored. So that's why you can read my findings for yourself by clicking the first link in the description. Read at your own risk. Mara Tollins is 34 years old, high school cross-country coach. She has been running trails in Licking County for 11 years. The same routes, the same pre-dawn start windows, the kind of accumulated mileage that teaches you a place at a level your conscious mind never fully accesses. You stop seeing the trail and start moving through it. She knows every rooted section of her regular route, every low branch, every place where the drainage crosses close to the path. She has encountered deer on that trail at close range enough times to have stopped flinching at the sound of them moving off. She is not someone who startles easily in that terrain. She had been running those trails in the dark for years, and she had never once felt the need to stop. The morning it happened, she was 2 miles into a route she had run so many times her pace was automatic. Pre-dawn, her regular trail passes through a section of older growth where the canopy closes in and the light comes later than it does in the open sections. A stretch of maybe 300 meters where it stays dark longer than everywhere else on the route. She knows a particular oak at the left edge of the trail through that section. She has been using it as an informal pace marker for years, knows exactly where the first major branch splits from the trunk and what height that puts it. She passed it that morning and looked left, without knowing why she looked left. It was behind the tree, partially, not hidden. The shape of it was visible clearly on either side of the trunk, the width of it and the height of it above the branch she has used as a marker for years. The eyes were above that branch. She knows the height of that branch. She has run past it hundreds of times, and she has never needed to calculate its exact measurement before that morning because nothing had ever given her a reason to. She kept running. She told me that it was not a conscious decision to keep moving. Her legs kept doing what they had been doing because that is what a body does when it is 2 miles into a route it has run hundreds of times. What she did do, without deciding to, was count her strides from the moment she saw it until the canopy opened back up and that section of old growth was behind her. She knows her stride length on that trail to within a few inches. She ran the math afterward and she can tell you exactly how far behind her it was standing and for how long those eyes were on her back before the trees opened up. I have thought about what it takes to keep your stride count while something 9 feet tall is standing behind you in the dark, and I genuinely do not know if I could do it. It never moved. From the moment she looked left to the moment she cleared the section, it stayed behind that oak and watched her go. No sound behind her, no pursuit, no branch moving, just a presence that had been standing there before she arrived and was still standing there when she left. And the particular quality of being watched by something that is making no effort to hide the watching. She filed her account in a notebook she keeps. She told 2 people. She did not connect it to anything else because she had no reason to. It was a single morning on a familiar trail, anomalous and unresolved, and she filed it in the place in her mind where things that do not resolve go. She kept running her routes. She went back through that section of old growth the following morning and the morning after that, and the oak was just an oak again. She has never seen it there a second time, but she told me she notices the branch height every single time she passes it. Now, she cannot not notice it. That is what an encounter like that does to a reference point. It changes what you see when you look at it. She and Denny Carver have never met. Their accounts exist in separate documents written months apart, with no shared language between them. The eyes are in the same place in both accounts. The height resolves to the same number against 2 different reference objects that neither of them chose for the purpose of measurement. A utility marker Denny installed himself, and a tree branch Mara has run past 1,000 times. The stillness in both accounts has the same character. Not frozen, not afraid, deliberately held. Two people with no connection to each other in different parts of the same county, who looked up on separate mornings and found the same thing looking back. There is a third account. It is older than either Denny's or Mara's, filed years before both of them, and it comes from a farmer in the same county who was working his lower field at dusk when he saw something standing at the far tree line. He described it the way farmers describe things they do not have a category for, matter of fact, slightly annoyed, without embellishment. The height, the width of the shoulders, the way it stood, upright without the forward lean that animals carry when they rise onto hind legs, the eyes high off the ground that held on him across the width of the field for a long moment before the thing turned and walked into the woodlot. He stood in his field for a moment after it was gone, the way you stand in a room where something has just changed and you are still catching up to what it was. He wrote it down in the same practical language he used for everything else and did not connect it to anything because there was nothing at the time to connect it to. Same county, same description. Years earlier, no connection to the others until the three accounts were in the same place at the same time. The farmer never heard of Denny Carver. Mara Tollins did not know the farmer's field existed. They were three unrelated people who had the same morning at different points in the same decade, in the same piece of working Ohio land, and then went back to their lives and said nothing, because what would they have said, and to whom? The geography here is worth stopping on, because it is not what you expect when you picture a Bigfoot encounter. Licking County, Ohio is not wilderness terrain. It is not a remote mountain range or a national forest or the kind of place that shows up on distribution maps because it looks like suitable habitat from a satellite image. It is working land, farms, drainage corridors, second-growth woodlots, the marginal strips between fields that nobody actively manages and nobody really thinks about. Fence lines and utility easements and the thin bands of cover that connect one piece of ordinary farmland to the next. I grew up around land like that. I have driven those roads. Most people from the Midwest have. You do not look twice at those tree lines because in 40 years of driving past them, nothing has ever looked back. That is exactly the point. Whatever is moving through that county is not using wilderness. It is using the margins, the drainage corridors and second-growth strips and the unmapped ground between farms where nobody goes because there is no reason to go there. And the three locations in these accounts are not clustered. They are spread across the county, which means whatever this is has a range that covers working land the way a resident covers its territory, moving through fence-line corridors and drainage cuts and the back edges of fields that face the woodlots. Places nobody watches, places nobody has ever needed to watch before. The margins of working land are the one place nobody has ever had a reason to study. No trails through them, no reason to be in them. They exist between things, which means whatever uses them moves through a part of Ohio that has never had eyes on it. It has been doing this long enough that three separate people across three separate locations have had the same encounter without knowing the others happened. That is not a single animal passing through. That is something that has been here, that has established a pattern in this terrain across years, that has looked at enough people on enough mornings to have developed a very clear sense of which ones are worth stopping for and which ones are not. This animal has been operating in this terrain long enough to know the difference between a threat and a person on a fence line doing a job. That kind of discrimination does not come from instinct. It comes from time. The question that does not have a comfortable answer is how many of those mornings it was already there. Now here is the detail that does not appear in any of the initial accounts, not because anyone made a decision to leave it out, because none of them thought it was significant until the accounts were read together, and even then it took a moment to understand what the absence actually meant. Denny Carver spent 30 years in outdoor terrain. He has been close to bears in the field, close enough to smell them, which is something you do not forget. He knows what animal presence smells like in still, humid air, which is exactly what he had that morning. Pre-dawn, no wind, late August humidity, the kind of conditions where scent hangs close to the ground and does not dissipate. He closed to 30 feet. He registered nothing, not musk, not the warm animal density you feel in the air when something large is near you. Nothing. He stood at that tree line afterward and turned that absence over the same way he turned over the proportions and the eyes, trying to find the explanation that made it ordinary, and not finding one. Mara noted the same thing when she wrote her follow-up account. She runs pre-dawn specifically because that is when wildlife is active on her trails, which means she has encountered deer and fox at close enough range to know exactly what they put into the air. She has had deer cross within 10 feet of her at full pace. She knows that smell, that morning standing distance from something behind an oak in still pre-dawn air. Nothing. The farmer used different words, but the same observation. He described standing at the fence thinking the thing across the field should have had a smell at that distance, and did not. He noted it the way you note a detail that does not fit, and then set it aside because there is no box to put it in. It sat in his account for years with everything else unremarked on, until someone read all 3 documents in the same sitting and the absence appeared 3 times in a row. 3 accounts, 3 separate notes about the same absence. None of them flagged it initially because each assumed it was a personal gap, a wind shift, a moment of distraction. It was only when the accounts existed in the same place that the absence stopped being individual and became a pattern. I want to stay on this because it is the detail that changes everything else. Every large animal leaves a biological trace in the air around it. It is not optional. It is not a choice. It is chemistry. The only way that trace is absent is if something is actively managing the conditions that produce it. Consistently across multiple encounters in different locations in similar atmospheric conditions. That is not an animal that happens to be calm. That is an animal that knows you are using your nose and has decided what to do with that knowledge. That moves the thing in those Ohio tree lines out of a category entirely, and it reframes the eye contact. The locked gaze across all 3 accounts is easy to read as passivity on first pass. A large animal standing in the open, holding before it decides to move, the way deer do sometimes when they have not yet resolved whether a person is a threat. But an animal that is actively managing its scent output in still, humid air is not passive. It is operating. The stillness is not the stillness of something deciding. It is the stillness of something that has already decided and is executing on that decision. The eye contact is not a freeze. It is an assessment being completed, and the fact that every one of these encounters ended the same way, it held and then turned and walked off unhurried on its own schedule, tells you what the assessment produced. None of these people were threats. It looked at them long enough to confirm that, and then it left. Every time, without exception. The same exit across 3 separate encounters, across years, as if the protocol for dealing with a human on this land had long since been established, and these 3 mornings were simply its execution. There is one more thing in Denny's account that I have not mentioned yet, and I have held it back because it lands differently once everything else is already in place. In the weeks after the encounter, he went back and looked at his work logs from the previous 2 years. Not for any specific reason. He said he was not sure what he was looking for when he started, but he found something. 3 separate mornings in the 14 months before the encounter, where he had noted in his log what he described as unusual quiet on the fence line. Not alarming, just the particular stillness he recognized afterward as the kind that means something nearby has stopped moving. He had logged it each time as a weather note, the kind of observation a working person makes without attaching significance to it. He had walked through that stillness 3 times and kept moving and gone home and never thought about it again. until he had a reason to. It had been watching him for over a year before it let him see it. Denny still walks that fence line. He goes out earlier than he used to, earlier than any reasonable work schedule requires, early enough to be at the field edge before the light starts changing. He has not seen it again. But he said something to me that I keep returning to. He said that in the weeks after the encounter, whenever he was at that field edge in the dark, he had the quiet, consistent sense of something already in the field before he got there. Not alarm, not threat. The particular quality of being somewhere that something else considers its own territory and being permitted to be in it. He told me he had started nodding at the field when he got there, just once, just a small acknowledgement in the direction of the tree line before he began his morning. He said he did not decide to start doing it. He just noticed at some point that he was doing it. I have covered enough of these accounts to know that the people who keep going back are always the ones who felt seen rather than threatened. And Denny nods at that field every single morning. 3 witnesses, Licking County, Ohio. Pre-dawn encounters on working land that nobody thinks of as significant terrain. The same height, the same stillness, the same absence in the air around it. The same quality of eye contact. Not a startle, not a flight, a look. A full, deliberate, assessed look that held until it was finished, and then walked back into the tree line without urgency on its own terms. 3 people in the same Ohio county locked eyes with a 9-foot Sasquatch, and every one of them, when they tried to describe what those seconds of eye contact actually felt like, reached for the same word. They felt recognized,